Hello, I'm John Richards from Auditing Cloud, and today we're talking about the Center for Internet Security's AWS Foundation's benchmark. We're looking at recommendation 215, ensure that S3 buckets are configured with block public access. This recommendation covers Amazon's simple storage service, more commonly known as an S3 bucket. CIS describes this recommendation as Amazon S3 provides block public access to help you manage public access to Amazon S3 resources. By default, S3 buckets and objects are created with public access disabled. However, an IAM principal with sufficient S3 permissions can enable public access at the bucket or object level. When enabled, block public access prevents an individual bucket and its contained objects from becoming publicly accessible. This setting lets us block public access to our S3 bucket, but why do we want to do that? The rationale is Amazon S3 block public access prevents the accidental or malicious public exposure of data contained within the respective buckets. Whether blocking public access to all or some buckets is an organizational decision that should be based on data sensitivity, least privilege, and use case. Putting sensitive data on a publicly accessible S3 bucket is a huge no-no. Don't do it. There are valid use cases for public S3 buckets, but those S3 buckets need to be clearly defined and have specific policy exceptions for why they are public. We have a policy within Auditing Cloud called Deny Public Access to Not-Allow Listed S3 Buckets. That monitors the configuration settings for this CIS recommendation. Auditing Cloud is an open source security as code policy engine that monitors your cloud environments for misconfiguration. Deny public access to non-allow listed S3 buckets is a security policy that checks AWS S3 buckets to verify they don't allow public access. And because of the huge risk that exposing sensitive data to the public poses, this is a critical issue, our highest severity ranking. If this is so important, we should ensure we're doing it. So how do we check? Let's use AWS Console to make sure we're blocking public access. We'll go to the S3 section and take a look at our buckets. What we're looking for is in the permissions section. We're checking the block public access. We can see the warning symbol here beside the off declaration, letting us know that this asset is not set to block public access. There are some fine-grained permissions here if we need, but we can see we aren't using any of those. Now let's open up Cloud Shell to audit this using CLI commands in the browser. We'll start by getting a list of all the AWS S3 buckets we have. Then we'll run a command to get the public access block value on our bucket. This returns any options enabled for blocking public access. But since we don't have any enabled, we get this error message confirming what we saw in the console. Our bucket is not blocking public access. And that's not good. So let's take steps to remediate this and block public access. To start with, we'll navigate back to our S3 bucket. We'll go to permissions where we can configure the settings for blocking public access. There are 4 options here that give us some helpful granularity. Now, if you are interested in the granularity between those different policies, I've included a link with more details in the notes of this video. But depending on the data stored in this bucket, it may be safer to block everything immediately. We can check this box to block all public access and hit save. If you use Terraform or CloudFormation to do infrastructure as code, you may need to modify the script that created this asset so the problem isn't replicated on future deployments. Misconfigurations like this are easy to miss, but by continuously monitoring policies using a free tool like Auditing Cloud, you can be sure that your things are configured correctly. Auditing Cloud runs policies across assets. Those assets are easily broken up into custom asset groups based on things like account, cloud provider, and tagging. I'll scope this session to just AWS. Here we see the Auditing Cloud dashboard where we can see metrics like criticality, category, and quantity of policy violations. Earlier we learned that deny public access to not allow listed S3 buckets has a severity of critical and will be represented here. Now we've secured our S3 bucket so there isn't a violation for deny public access to not allow listed S3 buckets, but we can double check by looking at specific assets. On the asset type distribution page, I'll drill down into one of our S3 buckets. And here we can see all the policies running against this bucket. We can see that deny public access to non-allow listed S3 buckets passes. Let's pull up that policy and look at the details. We can search for our specific policy. This is the policy page for deny public access to non-allow listed S3 buckets. We can see that Paladin Cloud monitors this every 6 hours to check for compliance, and there's a remediation link that takes us to documentation on how to resolve this issue. If this was helpful, please check out our free open source Paladin Cloud repository on GitHub, give us a star, and leave us a comment if you have any questions or feedback. Thank you so much for watching.